For the last 5 years, I've been giving my kids a budget to spend on all of their personal care products and their clothing products. I started doing this when my youngest was 7 and my oldest was 13. My kids were really starting to get to the age where they were spending more money on clothes. When I was younger, my parents gave me a budget for all of my clothing, and I knew I wanted to do the same thing with my kids. I figured out how much money I was already spending on their clothing and decided to give them 10% extra on top of it. They were already receiving allowance, so they were already familiar with how to spend money and how to do a budget, just obviously on a much smaller scale. But I made it a fun thing because I told them that whatever money was left over at the end that they did not spend, that they would get to keep and spend on whatever they wanted. They already had their own debit cards, which is how I gave them their allowance. So I put the money on their debit cards and taught them how to keep track of how much money was set aside for their clothing. I did explain there are certain rules that they needed to have clothing that didn't have holes in it, and they could look nice if we were going out to dinner or something as a family. Because $1,500 is a lot of money just to give a kid at one time, I decided to split it up into every 3 months, so doing it quarterly. I took each of the kids shopping by themselves for the first time so I could walk them through the process of totaling everything up as we went along to make sure they had enough money at the end. Although my kids were definitely surprised at how expensive clothes were. I feel like this has been really helpful for them because as adults, it's really easy to get overwhelmed with finances. So I want my kids to learn about finances when they're young, so it's not something that's so overwhelming when they get older. Even at the age of 7, my son had a phone, so I had him write down in his notes app, and I had the girls do it too, how much money they spent every time we went shopping for clothes. That way they knew how much money they had left over from their clothing budget. I also kept track of it on my end so we could like match everything up at the end, kind of like totaling out your books. They were so excited at the end of the 3 months to see all the money that they saved, and they also did do a really good job with picking out the clothing that they needed, and they did have everything they needed. And that's how I started doing a clothing and hygiene budget for my kids at the ages of 7, 9, and 13.